What's up, everybody? This is Whiskey in the Six, and today is World Whisky Day. And obviously, if you're joining us, you probably have had a marathon of entertainment with Aquavite, the Scotch Test Dummies, the Scotch 4 Dummies were supposed to be joining us tonight, but they won't be joining us due to technical difficulties. We had Swami on just before me and Bill and a whole bunch of other guys. Okay, so that was Malta in Montreal and the Whiskey Dick. It's been an awesome night so far. Tonight I have a special guest. I wanted to highlight for World Whisky Day one of my favorite distilleries, especially with some of the things that they've been coming out last year and this year, but really shaping up to be my distillery of the year this year, which is Highland Park. So I have Cam Millar, the Highland Park ambassador, with us tonight. Cam, why don't you say So Cam is set up over there, and we have the Highland Park 12-year-old, the Highland Park full volume, which came out in 2017, and the Highland Park 17-year-old, the dark, which also came out in 2017, correct?
Yes, it would have come out in November in the US, I believe.
All right, so Highland Park, your job is to bring Highland Park to Canada. That is pretty easy because they're a pretty awesome company in my opinion. But already we have Aquavite giving a super chat for the Graveyard Shift. Thank you so much for setting this all up, Roy. You did an awesome job, brother, and thank you for the super chat.
I just want to jump in. Hey, Mark, saying hello there. Jason, good choice of whiskey for your glass. It's awesome to be with everyone here, and I want to thank Rob and Whiskey.
Oh, did you cut out there? I think you're cutting out a little bit, Cam. It's okay. It's lagging a bit. I don't know. I'm not sure what's. Maybe it's a little bit of internet interference. Maybe we're breaking the internet because there's so many people watching, I think. Sorry, just repeat what you said because I didn't catch it. I don't know if they did, but I definitely didn't. You still there? We're still live. While that's sorted out on that side, I'm just going to quickly...
I can hear you on the computer now, so I can hear you on my phone, not the computer. Technology is all in this.
Is there a little bit of a delay on the phone though? That's the only.
I can hear you now, okay, on the computer. You blacked out there for a minute, but it's all good now.
Okay, so I'm not sure if these guys heard me or if they heard you or if they didn't hear either of us. So, do you mind just repeating what you were just saying really quickly?
Sure. Yeah, I was just pretty much thanking everyone for allowing me part of this, especially you, Rob, at Whiskey in the Six. It's an honor and a privilege to represent Highland Park here in Canada because of all the amazing people here who drink the whiskey. It was a big job for my predecessors to make the whiskey as popular as it is. And of course, starting out in 1979 as a single malt, I think we've done leaps and bounds to make it as popular as it is.
Yeah, honestly, when I first started drinking Scotch, I don't know if I loved every expression coming out of Highland Park, but lately I don't know. They've captivated me with this Highland Park full volume. I think this has inspired them. I hope it's inspired them to do more of these types of experiments because this was absolutely stunning in my opinion. So.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. It's always fun at Highland Park where we can take on different challenges and approach the whiskey we make in unique ways and tell a really fun story. That's been the most fun I've ever had with a whiskey brand and why I fell in love with it. It's these Viking stories. It's this approach to whiskey making that gives us flexibility and kind of freedom to find new flavors in a very unique place of making whiskey, which is Orkney.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. You got a crazy, different, natural surroundings. So you got the saltiness from the surrounded ocean, and then you got a whole bunch of weather issues that can impact how the whiskey can come out. Like you were alluding to it earlier. I'll let you share that later when we get to that specific whiskey. But the being on that island definitely has a role in the way the whiskey shapes.
It's an amazing place. If anyone has a chance to visit Scotland, especially all the fans out there for whiskey, you have to plan a trip to Orkney. Just seeing photos of the place makes you think of otherworldly places, things from books and movies. It's almost like another planet. But the people that are there are really the unique things about Orkney. They're the ones who set out to make this whiskey, and they have a heritage that goes back beyond Scotland into Viking era. So, being part of the vast Viking nation well before it got assimilated into Scotland. So it's interesting to go back and see how Orkney came about, but the people who live there definitely have a unique way of making whiskey, and we get to enjoy that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just want to give a quick shout out to Malted in Montreal Swami for the super chat. Thank you so much, brother. He's been hitting up the super chats a lot lately. I definitely can't wait till you get to 1,000 subscribers so that I can return the favor. All right, so without further ado, actually, before, how rude of me, I didn't even thank you for coming on my channel. I really appreciate you coming on tonight, and it's late. It's 11 o'clock for us, 11 o'clock p.m. I'm sure your girlfriend wasn't too happy with me hitting you up with this favor, but I really appreciate you coming on. So
yeah, she doesn't mind. It's the dog. He's a little upset. He wants to go to sleep.
All right, well, new look, pretty cool bottle, I think. I have one of the old ones just in case the value of those ones decide to go up, but honestly, they dropped the price to $70 at the LCBO, and it's I think it's about $60 in Alberta and maybe a little cheaper in the US. I'm not 100% sure, but great value in my opinion for a really, really good 12-year-old whiskey.
Yeah, the price correction really was to make sure that the people we currently had as part of our community really felt that we were sticking to how the industry was trending without going overboard by any means. We know that we have a very tight-knit community and want to make sure they're happy. So that was definitely a part of the direction Highland Park's going in, but it's more about the repackaging. We won best new packaging at the World Whisky Awards this year, and I think it's a stunning design. Looks great backlit, but in the end, it's a harkening back to the stories we like to tell and the image we want to present to the world, but liquid inside hasn't changed.
Right on. So, mostly sherry influence in this one, or what are we looking at?
Yeah, so 100% sherry seasoned casks are used in this one. You see a larger portion of that European oak coming through. I believe it's about 20% European sherry oak, providing that wonderfully rounded, intense but balanced flavor in Highland Park 12. I don't want to wait any longer. I think we should pour ourselves a little bit of a dram here. It is World Whisky Day, so why not? But this one is all about the beginning of Highland Park. So this was our first single malt we ever released from Highland Park. Everything before that, dating back to when we first became a distillery in 1798, was either top dresser for blends or into private bottlings. So this was the first time we stood our hand up and said, hey, we've got something amazing here. And it's been that sort of sweetheart for a lot of people ever since. Knowing we have that sort of cool maturation in Orkney, even though it's 12 years old and naturally colored, it tends to be a bit lighter than its brothers and sisters south of us into Macallan. But on the nose where we really start seeing Orkney come to life.
Yeah, it's definitely got, like, in my opinion, I don't know, and maybe your notes are different, but there's a little bit of a salinity that you don't get in a Macallan 12-year-old, the single cask, or the sherry cask.
Yeah, there's a lot of debates around what the environment really does to a cask that's maturing. I've had the pleasure of having some Highland Park that's been purchased privately and then aged more south, so closer to Edinburgh and the Lowlands, and it tastes very different. You would never know it was a Highland Park, even though it came from Orkney. And so once you start aging something for 12 years or longer in that environment, you really start adopting some of those rich sort of sea air expressions. Being battered by that wind day in, day out, gale force winds, something's going to work its way into those casks, and definitely that salinity. But I always have that sweetness. There's a almost stone fruit or orchard fruit note to it that makes me think of a sweet tanginess. I harken back to actually barbecue sauce. If you think of a sweet tangy barbecue sauce, you have this wonderful sweet spiciness to the whiskey on the nose.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a hint. Like maybe it's that small amount of smoke. It's not really a lot of smoke. It's what's the ppm on this? Is there like 3 or 4? It's probably not very high, right?
I want to say it's closer to maybe 12. It's not very high, nowhere near our Isla cousins, but this is sitting at a very mild smoke flavoring. And it's in 2 parts where this comes from. The first is that our peat, so what we use to actually dry some of our barley on site, comes from a place called Habister Moor. That's our peat bog, and that's in Orkney. That's in its own island, and a place that has very few trees due to that strong winds I mentioned. We have a treeless peat, so you automatically have a much lighter smoke coming off our kiln. And then when we actually go to our mash, we're using a small portion of peated barley and some unpeated barley. So it creates a very mild, more nuanced flavor of smoke that I tend to think of as a supporting role, right? It's going to add structure to the whiskey, but not be the main character. We're still relying on those sherry casks to provide much of the power in this whiskey.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind, I think I'm going to have a wee dram here.
Yeah, I'm going to have a sip. Cheers. And cheers to everybody for World Whisky Day. And thank you to Roy for setting this all up. And thank you to all of the YouTubers that entertained everyone all night, including myself. Super smooth.
It's a wonderful whiskey because you get everything in it. I like that wonderful spice on the top of the tongue, that wood oaky spice, that wonderful dry astringency on the side of the tongue, and that wonderful dry smoke that comes billowing across the tongue at the end. It's literally got every little flavor you look for in certain whiskeys, all in one glass. And none of them tend to overpower the other. It's about nuanced balance, yet intense.
Yeah. Honestly, I haven't reviewed this one yet, believe it or not. I bought 2 of them. Like I said, I bought this one, and there was one of the older version left on the shelf, and I just bought it more for nostalgia than anything else, just because I hate to see things go and never be able to get them again. But this is definitely one that is easy to have on the bar at all times because it's a great go-to whiskey. It's not overpowering. It's probably made for everyone, especially those who are looking to just slowly introduce themselves to peat, I think.
For sure. It's something I think it's not challenged by any means. Anyone can get into Highland Park 12. It's an interesting whiskey to introduce to people because that peat smoke's not overpowering. It's not going to hit you over the head. It's almost hey, by the way, whiskey can taste this good this way. And it's a wonderful introduction that people kind of don't anticipate. A lot of my tastings when I go through the whiskeys into Highland Park, they go, I didn't expect that. I go, it's good, bad? Like, no, I loved it. I just didn't expect it. As soon as you hear peated single malt, you're expecting a certain flavor. And here, I think it provides a wonderful insight to how wonderfully made Highland Park really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I definitely agree. On the palate, other than that barbecue and other than that smoke, there is some nice, like, I don't know if it's some sort of red fruit, but it's not dominating. I can't put a finger on it. I'm not exactly sure what I'm getting there.
You see, especially into the Highland Park 18, Spirit of the Year winner a number of times, you start seeing more of that sherry focus and that sort of fruit note come through, where here you're seeing a wonderful balance between spice and sweetness. But you're definitely starting to see that sherry influence peeking its nose up. and we'll always have that approach to Highland Park 12. Again, the word I overuse as well, but it's balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great word to describe this one for sure. So Viking honors, is there any, other than the fact that Orkney is well known for its Viking history and that sort of thing, is there any other meaning behind the Viking honors? Is just like a tribute to Vikings, or is that what it's kind of like, you know, how it says Viking honors right on the bottle?
So if you look at Highland Park 10, Viking Scars, Highland Park 12, Viking Honor, and Highland Park 18, Viking Pride, these are all values of the Viking. So, you know, are you really a Viking without a scar? Have you ever been to battle? So that's a big part of what Highland Park 10 represents. That's sort of like your first few steps to becoming that true Viking. And it's honor. So every Viking was judged and compared to one another through honor. If you had no honor, you weren't really worth anything. So that's a big part of it. And of course, if you don't have pride in what you do, you know, people, you know, you aren't really living a full life. And if you look at those core values of the Vikings, they're represented in our whiskeys. You know, we've gone through our scars and developing the whiskey and finding our footing in the industry. We take pride in what we do, and we're I think honorable with maintaining a naturally colored product. We try and give you as much information about it as possible. And, you know, some may say that price correction is also quite honorable.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. As soon as I saw it, I jumped all over it. So.
And if you look at the packaging, not only did we update the name and the look, we actually gave you a map to Orkney. So in the bottom of the bottle, you'll see right there, I don't know if I can tilt it any better. If you're ever lost, there's always a map to Orkney in the bottom of Highland Park.
That's pretty cool. I didn't notice that before. Very nice. All right. So, and this whole line was launched last year, 2017.
Yeah, that's when we started seeing the rebranding come about.
So then we moved to the bottle that's black, and I don't know how much I have left, and probably not very much because I've been I've been tapping into this one quite often. I bought 2 of these. And we actually had a chance to talk about this on my channel the first time you were on my channel. That was the first time I actually had the pleasure of tasting this. And since then, I absolutely have fallen in love with this whiskey, to be honest.
Now, you mentioned this earlier, that this was the first whiskey that really started to win you over to the brand. Now, what was your first Highland Park you ever had?
The first Highland Park I ever had was the 18-year-old, to be honest with you.
That didn't win you over?
So I liked it. I really did. But at the time, this was well before I started my channel. I wasn't as into peat as I am, well, as I toward starting my channel and moving forward. So
you hadn't quite matured as a whiskey advocate.
I think that's probably what it is. Yeah, exactly. I really didn't respect it as much as I would now, and I did review it. I reviewed a sample of it that was given to me by Nicholas, and I loved it at that point. If I would have tried it, if I had bought a bottle now, I know I would love it, just because it's everything I look for in a whiskey. I love a little bit of peat in my whiskey. Actually, I would prefer something even a little bit more peated now. So.
Yeah, you see how your palate kind of evolves, definitely. And there's nothing wrong with that. Highland Park 18 is a complex whiskey. There's a lot going on. It's very powerful. So don't mean to drag you through the mud on that one. Just fun to see that was your first one. But
well, you know what? I'm glad you asked that question, because I talk a lot about this on my channel, how palates evolve. And like when I first started drinking whiskey, I was a Canadian whiskey guy, and I thought I was going to be a Canadian whiskey guy for the rest of my life. And I collected Canadian whiskey, and it's funny how drastically that's changed. I'm just actually coming full circle now into really appreciating some of the Canadian whiskeys that are being released. But yeah, so.
Well, I'm a big believer in vertical tastings, horizontal tastings, and for what that means is, you know, one distillery and a number of distilleries kind of side by side, because the only way you really start seeing nuances and real differences or complexities within one glass is when you can compare it to something similar and something drastically different. Then you start drawing real strong parallels between them, and you start building a roadmap for your palate, really. We've all seen those sort of spider charts or you know, quadrants laying out flavors, but it's your personal palate that you need to be master of. And that's the only way to do it, is to try a lot of different flavors.
Absolutely. I honestly, I believe that you need to try at least a handful of every single type of whiskey out there to know what you prefer. And then beyond that, like that's just entry level. Then you really have to get into it and know a whole bunch of different whiskeys to really know whiskey, in my opinion. If I were to do certain blind tastings that I've done recently, 5 years ago, I would have failed miserably. But now, because I've tried, I'm on whiskey video number 263 now. So I've tried a ton of whiskey in the last 2.5 years. Beyond that, I've tried a whole bunch of whiskey before that as well. So I'm getting to the point where I'm really starting to get into my zone, I hope. I just want to ask you one question from Santa Cruz, and he's asking if you guys are planning on doing or expanding your single cask releases.
I've had a few conversations about this. I've had the honor and I have the pleasure of being, you know, whiskey brothers with Martin Markinson, so our global ambassador for Highland Park. He actually oversees a lot of the work with that as well, sort of helping select these single casks. I don't get to see much of that. I don't have any influence on that. Not sure where this individual is coming from. I know that in Ontario, we will have a single cask release upcoming.
Oh,
that's what I can say, and it's exciting.
that is really exciting for me, because we never get those kinds of things in Ontario. So I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, Highland Park's always looking for ways to engage with our community. I encourage everyone to go onto the Highland Park website and join the Inner Circle. This is where you get newsletters and updates on what's happening in Orkney and at the distillery. And there are a lot of lotteries for bottles. Unfortunately, due to the way that our country is structured, we can't ship to the country. So I always encourage people to either have an address outside the country they can ship to, or a good friend.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, honestly, like acquiring whiskey, especially as a YouTuber, I had to learn the ins and outs of it, because otherwise it would be very hard to keep the channel going with what's available for the most part at the LCBO. So
it's an ongoing battle. We do what we can to stay educated. The LCBO is constantly improving, and we're constantly trying to find ways to honestly improve the experience for consumers in terms of navigating the whiskeys, accessing the whiskeys, and knowing what's coming out. But every province, every country has their own issues. No one's perfect, but everyone will draw criticisms of their own, you know, hometown.
Yeah, that's exactly, because we're in the heart of it, right? So
no one wants to have resistance to their whiskey. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Should we get into full volume?
Absolutely. I just want to, before we do that, I just want to give a quick thank you to George Kaplan, who did a super chat. Thank you so much, George. Really appreciate it, buddy. For the Professor of Whiskey, thanks for learning us proper. You're welcome, brother. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be called the Professor of Whiskey. Yeah, so let's get into the full volume. Like I said, I tried this. I reviewed this in 2018, although it came out in 2017, and I tried it with you in 2017.
Well, that's why you like it so much, because you had it with me.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Honestly, I do love it though, and I recommend it. And honestly, I think what also makes me love it so much is that they were very detailed and very forthcoming with the information on the bottle. You know when it's distilled, you know when it's bottled, you know what's inside the bottle, and the price is, I don't know if it's changed, but it's like $130 Canadian, right?
Excuse me. Yeah, and even when I was on your channel, I thought it was going to be priced even higher at that point when we first got it, and we think we were both surprised when it came in at $130. So amazing price point for this whiskey, and we're going to maintain an expression in that price point in our portfolio annually. So this was a one-off. This was a wonderful experiment that turned out in a great way, I think. And so later this year, if not into 2019, there should be another expression within the portfolio at this price point.
Awesome. Whiskey Throttle, who's another whiskey channel that is airing tonight, just super chatted me. Thank you so much. And he says, for the integrity of whiskey and whiskey knowledge and real Vikings. So I think you'd like that one.
Oh, that one.
So whenever I'm smelling this, I get hint of apple, some lemon, and then this tail end of a little bit of smoke. And it's such a beautiful combination, in my opinion.
Well, knowing that Highland Park has always, in that core range of 10, 12, and 18, the focus has been sherry casks. Here, we see an experiment through our master whiskey maker, Gordon Motion, of just ex-bourbon barrels. Put to rest in 1999, 17 years old. You see a wonderful light liquid. Like, that's very lightly yellowed, almost clear in terms of color, but that's 17 years old. And we always, dispel myths of darker is older. It depends on what it's matured in. And once we've matured that Highland Park spirit in only ex-bourbon barrels, those beautiful light flavors you just mentioned come to the forefront. So these citrus notes, these vanillas, these floral flavors are definitely things that people tend to pick out first. But it's a wonderful surprise, I think, for people who get into it.
I find that, and I went ahead and took a sip anyway, but I find that the nose, you don't get as much smoke, but you take a sip and the finish is nicely smoked. It's like a nice charcoal type smoke.
I call it the sort of the backdraft almost, right? So on the nose, you're getting that citrus, that floral, that sort of almost fresh whiskey. And then as we have a sip, which I'll join you on, you get that full power of Highland Park.
Absolutely. Cheers. I forgot to mention that this is 47.2%. That's another reason why I love this so much. They give you the extra couple percent in the ABV. Overall, I have zero criticisms of this whiskey, which doesn't happen very often.
You stole my segue. I was gonna talk about the ABV because right on that palate, instead of having that sort of side of the tongue, heavy into the tongue, this lifts off, right? This sits in the roof of the mouth. You're getting more of those citrus, almost like a pineapple-y tartness. And then that smoke kind of just, again, billows in that backdraft. You start seeing that really intense citrus of the American oak, right? The bourbon barrels are going to provide that light spectrum of flavor. But at 47.2%, we're allowing that energy to remain on the palate. And, you look at the box here with the stacked speakers. You look at the dials on the side. They've got the volume turned to 11, great Spinal Tap reference, and you feel it, right? You feel the power and the energy in this whiskey. That's very different from another 100% ex-bourbon expression, which would be ice. Think of Highland Park Ice. That's like spearmint. It's wonderful. It's cooling. It's a wonderful sensation on the tongue. But here you're seeing, pardon the terrible marketing term, but rock and roll in a glass. It's they're kind of riffing on the expressions of Highland Park, but really leaning on those ex-bourbon barrels to bring in that freshness and sweetness.
Yeah. No, it's honestly beautiful. And I don't get a chance to really go through too much of my whiskey because after it's on this table until I get to review it, and then it goes upstairs, and that's for guests and whatever else. But this one I have a lot to choose from upstairs, but I just keep coming back to the Highland Park full volume just because it's a beautiful whiskey. It's exactly what I'm looking for. It wows me almost every single time that I take a sip.
That's good. That's the experience we want. Excuse me.
Yeah. So honestly, I'm a big fan. I hope that they experiment with that a little bit more. I mean, I would love to know what that would be like. A little smokier and a little bit higher in the ABV, like a cask strength version, like a single cask version, maybe. That'd be pretty cool.
We'll always call out what cask type we're using in the single cask. So, it's always that ongoing journey to find those elusive single casks when they become available in unique markets. I don't have any information on the one coming to Ontario yet. I'm sure you and I will get together and enjoy it sometime soon when it does become available. But you are seeing more Highland Park expressions that have just amped up the peat note. So Valkyrie was an example of that. And the next release within that lineup of 3, Valkyrie was the first. The next one being Valknut will again be heavily peated for a Highland Park. I say for a Highland Park. Remember, we're very mild on our smoke, so don't compare that to an Isla. But you're seeing more of the angle that you said. As your palate evolves, you kind of seek out these more heavily peated expressions. And so that'll be an interesting journey we all get to go on.
So I'm guessing, like, have you been to Orkney at all? Like, have you had the opportunity to go to?
Not yet. I'm planning a trip hopefully in September when the weather is as nice as possible.
Absolutely. It hovers between, like, it's low on average, right? All year round, as far as degrees Celsius.
So looking at Orkney on a global map, it's pretty much parallel to Anchorage, Alaska. So it's quite north. You look at the environment there, battered by wind and waves. The temperature ranges between 4 and 12 degrees, give or take. So we call that cool maturation in terms of when our whiskeys are sitting there for 17 years, you're getting a very, not saying mild maturation, but you get a wonderful yield and you get a very unique style of interaction between oak and spirit.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I believe on the box it says filtered at 4 degrees Celsius. Am I correct? I don't have the box with me right now. I have a second bottle in the bunker, but I don't have.
It's here. Excuse me. I was gonna find the English.
Actually
filtered at 4 degrees Celsius.
4 degrees, yeah. So there's a big debate as to whether or not that's chill filtered, right? Because a lot of times chill filtration goes down. I think it's in the negatives. I can't remember the exact number. I think I want to say like minus 11 or 12 rings a bell.
But I can't think of it. But yeah, when you start getting particles suspended, yes.
Yeah. So it's not technically, quote unquote, technically chill filtered, right? It's filtered, and all whiskey is filtered, right? All whiskey has to be filtered. They can't have large floaty particles in a whiskey. That wouldn't be good for business. That wouldn't be good for anybody, right?
I've seen a bottle come right out of a cask, and you see the bottom of the bottle, and there's sediments in it, right? So any of the whiskeys you walk into at the LCBO, you're not going to see sediments in the bottom. So yes, they've been filtered. Or at least strained. So you want to make sure that that's clean. They're the ones knowing how to get the most performance out of this whiskey, right? They're the master whiskey maker. I don't make whiskey. I have the pleasure of enjoying it and talking about it and preaching it. So they're the ones looking to get the most out of it. That's why it sits at the 40% ABV. Why they're doing the 4 degrees chill, filtration, I should say. It really depends on what they're trying to achieve in terms of a palate.
So there's a question in the chat for you, and it could be a difficult question, but I think it could be an easy question as well. So the question is from Daniel Whiskey Throttle. He has a YouTube channel as well, so if you haven't checked him out, you should check him out. It says, what is Cam Millar's favorite non-Highland Park whiskey? So he was specific to say Highland Park, so that gives you some leeway, I think.
I will preface this because it'll seem like, oh, you're great, really bipartisan. I do represent other whiskeys within our family, notably the Macallan and Glenrothes. So easily I get to pick out some amazing whiskeys and still get to be politically, correct when I talk about them. So it really depends on my mood. Like anyone, my whiskey ranges. Within my personal collection, I've got whiskey from all over the world. If I'm having someone over who wants to drink a certain style of whiskey, I'll join them with that. If I'm not drinking a Highland Park, I tend to reach for my Macallan 12 double cask just because it's so balanced and really rich without being that overpowering flavor that I can have at any time in the evening and then move into another whiskey, right? I'll tend to finish my evening with Highland Park because of the peat notes. And then if I'm introducing someone to a lot of single malts, I'm obviously reaching for my Glenrothes. But anytime out of that the Scotch category, I'll enjoy a great Japanese whiskey, a good Indian whiskey. We're thinking about the Amrut, all that. So the list goes on. It's very difficult to pick one, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that goes for, I think, everybody. When people ask me what my favorite whiskey is, it would be like, what did I try this week? I don't know. It's so hard to pick, and it's always changing. It's an evolving, and then you go back. I don't know. It continues to change constantly, in my opinion.
Especially when it comes to the season, right? What am I? Everyone says, "Oh, you must start drinking vodka cocktails in the summer." No, I'm still going to drink my whiskey. That's because that's what I like. I like the flavors. But the whiskeys I'm going to be drinking in the summer, on a patio, at a cottage, even camping, going to be a bit different from the whiskeys I'm drinking in the dead of winter, sort of, around the dinner table with family over the holidays. Each whiskey is going to be lending itself to a unique situation at a moment because that's what I want to taste. So honestly, if we're talking about full volume right now, this is for me summertime whiskey. It's that sweet, light freshness, that zest, that wonderful sort of citrus notes that I'm going to draw a lot more interest in the summer. But if we're talking into the winter, well, I think the next whiskey we drink would be the right one for that.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say the same thing. I actually like peated whiskeys, ex-bourbon aged whiskeys in the summer. I think it bodes well with the the hot climate and that sort of thing. And then the one that we're talking about next is this beautiful, and it actually surpassed my expectations at first. And from what I read, I thought it would be good. I didn't think it would be bad at all. But sometimes it's okay to judge a book by its cover. This is literally one of the nicest bottles I've ever seen in my life. And the whiskey almost, I think it's excellent stuff. So
another opaque bottle, which for those of us who tend to drink the whiskey quite often will be frustrated by because we never know how much we have left, but it's on purpose. We make our whiskeys opaque because we want you to put yourself in a vulnerable position. We don't want you to sort of look at it and go, oh, I love the color, or I don't like the color. You're going to have to take a risk. Just like the Vikings would back in the day when they would set sail, there was very few instruments and knowing where they're going to go into the the dark ocean. So really, if you look at Valkyrie, you look at Full Volume, even Highland Park Magnus, all opaque bottles, leaving you to discover the whiskey on your own. And Highland Park Dark represents that as well. But the good news is you have me. I will help you guide through this one. And the first thing to understand is that, like any of these Highland Park limited releases, it comes in two parts. We saw Highland Park Ice and Highland Park Fire. This is the dark, and it will be followed by the light. And that actually is represented on the box here. So this would be the sun in the sky during the summer and the spring. And then I'm not sure if you can see it, but at the bottom there, you see the low sun and the moon during, of course, fall and winter. And if you're looking as north as Orkney is, you've got very long winter nights and very long summer days.
I was actually wondering what those two circles represented, but there you go. Very cool. It's a cool box. I notice Highland Park does this quite often where they'll do an open face and an open back. Is that essentially just to highlight the look of the bottle because they put a lot of work into the way the bottle looks?
That's it. I like to describe the peat Highland Park uses as framework or a supporting role in the overall whiskey. And that's what the packaging is. The packaging should never be the main character. It should be a supporting role. And that's what this does. It literally frames this whiskey. You look at Odin, Thor, Loki, Freya, Fire, Ice. These are all whiskeys that have frames. They have vessels, boats for some of us if you look at the Viking Legend series. But that's what it's meant to do, is to frame the whiskey and present it. This is something that I'd want people to see on my personal bar.
Absolutely. I just want to acknowledge, I think while I was searching for a link to the person that's following us, I got super chatted by Daydreaming. Daydreaming, thank you very much. He's from Australia. He says, happy World Whiskey Day 2018. Daydrammin is on Instagram at the moment. I don't know if he's going to transition into YouTube, but he's all over Instagram doing a really, really good job, posting really cool pictures on a daily basis. So you guys should check him out and definitely follow him on Instagram if you guys have an opportunity. Have you poured yourself a dram of this Highland Park the Dark?
Excuse me. I literally just cracked this open. This is a brand new bottle yet because we don't have this available yet in Ontario. So apologies to all my compatriots here. Both Rob and I have friends in good places. I'm one of those good friends, I guess. So I'm pouring this actually as a fresh dram. And again, I actually had this first in Chicago with our global ambassador, Martin. And it was wonderful to sort of experience it with him as he gets to really see all these be put together where he lives in Orkney.
Yeah. Another YouTube channel who preceded me tonight did an awesome job, had a ton of people watching. They do an awesome job on a regular basis. Really, really cool guys. That's probably Scott watching right now, but Bart's got a family like I do, or a young family, I should say, like I do. Scott has a family as well, but they're a little bit older, so he gets a little bit more freedom these days. I can't wait to those days. But he just super chatted me. Thank you so much to the Scotch Test Dummies. Really appreciate it. This one you were saying earlier is 100% sherry casks for still?
Yes, sir. So if you look at those two colors between our 100% ex-bourbon barrel 17-year-old and 100% European sherry oak hogshead casks in this hand, massive difference in color. So, yes, bourbon barrels are 200 liters. They're smaller. You have a lot of wood contact, which is great, but it's these hogsheads that are half the size of a typical sherry cask. 500 liters for a butt or a puncheon, 250 liters for a hogshead. So right away, this is sherry seasoned, but we've also just shrunk that cask down to really intensify everything going on. And that's where we get these deep, dark colors. And a whiskey that I think you and I will agree is very intense and gives you all of the effects that a sherry or European sherry oak cask should impart into a whiskey.
Honestly, and quickly, right before I get to this next thought, I want to say thank you to Jason Fisk. Thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it, buddy. He's thanking me for having you on. And I want to explain why I did that. I opened this bottle. And I'm all about, like, these guys watch us for a reason. They watch us because they want honesty, they want integrity, they want real opinions. And I couldn't think of a better ambassador to have on that I truly can get behind because I truly love these whiskeys. If I didn't love these whiskeys, I would skirt around not doing this tonight. You know what I mean? I probably would have invited somebody else, or I probably would have not had anybody at all. But I love these whiskeys. You're a great guy, Cam. I really like you. You do an awesome job. But I can sit here and say I love these whiskeys, and I'm not afraid of the backlash or whatever else of people thinking, oh, he has an ambassador on, so he has to be nice or whatever. I honestly do love this dark. I love the full volume. I really, really enjoy the Highland Park on a daily basis type dram. This one though, I cracked it open. I'm like, man, it's in the running for my whiskey of the year. Who better to have than Cam Millar to talk about what these guys can expect from this whiskey? So,
this is going to be hopefully that whiskey that people start seeing as, Highland Park's able to really amplify and showcase what we've always done with the reflection into its next expression, the light, in terms of what we also can do. This one's going to retail, I believe, for $430, so the same price point as Fire and Ice, but 28,000 bottles made globally. And when we, again, talk about those hogsheads, not a lot of liquid coming out of it. So the fact that you and I get to share this together is an honor and a pleasure. And I do love that you enjoy it as much as you do, because when I first had this, it sent me back to my first Highland Park that I ever had. Predominantly American sherry oak and the Einar, a travel retail exclusive. But it was kind of like, whoa, like there's a lot going on here that I don't know how to navigate. So it's a pleasure to actually celebrate World Whiskey Day with you, Rob. It was a pleasure to have my first sort of YouTube experience as the ambassador in your home. Wonderful to do it the first time now, I assume as a satellite or a hot stove. But I think it's wonderful to share this with you and the rest of everyone here. So I'll say Skål, as they do in Orkney, and I'll enjoy my Highland Park, the Dark 17.
So it's Skål, you said?
Mm-hmm. S-K-A-L, Skål. It's the Viking way of saying cheers.
Very nice.
Sláinte.
Very nice. Man, I love that whiskey.
Now, interesting that we've gone from 17 to 17. Completely different. Massively bursts of spices and warm cinnamon and rising up from my neck into my cheek. It literally warms me from the inside out. That's, again, something that we talk about seasons and when we're drinking them. That's a wonderful winter whiskey. I know we're receiving it in Canada into our spring and summer, but this is something that I'm going to keep for the holidays with my family and warm everyone up in the depths of a very cold Canadian winter.
Yeah, honestly, like I know there's 28,000 bottles of this, which is not a small amount of bottles. That's kind of like a standard release for something that would be like a yearly release, I would think, right? Like not too much more than that, maybe a little bit.
You got to remember, we want it to be available globally, right? Canada is a large market, but small in comparison to other ones. So anytime we're able to get some, you know that the release is going to be quite global. And this definitely is one of those expressions where everyone gets a chance at an allocation. 28,000 released globally, great. You know, I don't have the numbers right here in terms of how many come into Canada, but not that many.
Right.
Right away, we were limited to that. So it makes it a fleeting experience, which I kind of like. I love when whiskeys are not something one-off, but something that makes you part of a community. My friend in the East Coast, Joanne McGinnis, would call it a whiskey fabric, right? We're all a part of this whiskey network, and today's all about that with everyone doing these YouTube channels. And the fact that only so many of us will get a chance to try this is kind of a heartwarming experience that we'll have that together.
Absolutely.
It reminds us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. This one in particular, I hope many of the guys that are in the chat, they're in chats on a regular basis. They watch all the YouTube channels. They're in all the lives. I get a great opportunity. Honestly, I feel like a bunch of these guys are my good friends because I speak to them almost as frequently as I speak to my friends, just because of the way life works when you live in a big city and you don't get to see everybody very often. So we all have the opportunity to go into these lives, which the YouTube community has kind of set up so that there's somebody going every day. And it's been awesome. And I really do hope that these guys get to have a dram. And just because of that, I'm actually going to be giving away a dram of this tonight alongside a t-shirt, obviously of their size and choosing. There's two options. You get either this traditional whiskey in the six shirt, or you get the newer one without the barrel in the background. And it's going to be a question that you have about Highland Park. So I don't want to put you on the spot. You have about 5 minutes to come up with a question if you'd like. We'll talk a little bit more about this whiskey. I do want to mention that Keith from the Malted Man Cave will be next at 12 o'clock, and I'm going to post his link in the chat below, so you guys can just click as soon as we're done here and jump over. So hopefully you didn't tune out just yet, so that we can. I for whatever reason my channel is acting a little weird. I can't see how many people we have in the channel, but or in the chat anyway. But yeah.
So just so I'm clear, I got to think of a question about Highland Park to ask the group, and whoever answers it correctly wins. Is that
the first person to answer it correctly? So you're gonna ask the question, and then literally we're gonna scope the chat to see who the first person is. Whoever wins gets a sample of the Highland Park Dark as well as a t-shirt.
Okay, let me think about that.
Yeah. So think about that. I want to mention, I don't know if we talked too much in detail about this, but it's 52.9%. I'm guessing that's not cask strength, right?
It'll probably be slightly diluted. Actually, I have information that I can confirm because this is so new. I can confirm right now. I think it's slightly diluted just to control the flavor. And let me find it. I have this written down. Yeah, nothing mentioned of it. They would have said cask strength. I would have called out, but most likely slightly diluted just to make sure that all the power remains in the cask. But we can confirm. I'll follow up with an email and double check that. But I believe this has been slightly diluted.
Okay, so that's something that I'll definitely mention in my review when the time comes. I'll hit you up for that information.
Of course. I have a question though, and this is, I think, an easy one. I don't think I mentioned it. So for those of us who are fans of Highland Park, we have a very humble beginning back in 1798. We were founded by a single individual, a man of Viking descent. He was an amazing individual who, we owe everything to. So if anyone can tell me the name of Highland Park's founder, I think then Rob can have his winner.
Awesome. Okay, so you're going to have to help me out with this one because I don't even know the name of this.
I will text you the answer, don't worry.
So Telex is saying Magnus, and then the Whiskey Thief is saying Magnus. That was my first guess as well, but
I need his full name. His full name. First
so Mike Lee says Magnus Junsen.
That's the one. Magnus Junsen, the founder of Highland Park.
And Mike Lee is the winner. All right, so Mike, please email me your information. My email is whiskeyinthe6 the number, not the word, @gmail.com. And then I can hook you up with a sample of Highland Park 17-year-old The Dark, as well as a t-shirt of your choosing.
And let me know when you're sending that, because I want to include a little bit of stuff from Highland Park for you as well.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you very much for doing that, Cam. I really appreciate that.
No problem. I just want to say thank you to everyone who've taken part in today. I would not have a job without all the wonderful people who advocate and support whiskey as much as they do, yourself included, Kwame, everyone out there who put together their time and effort and volunteering to just talk about whiskey the way you do, which gives, I think, everyone an opportunity to understand what they're drinking and make whiskey more accessible. I try and do that every single day of my life and my job, but I'm limited to who I can reach. But through you guys doing these types of channels, you reach so many more people. So big thank you to you and everyone involved today. And
I want to throw that right back at you and say thank you, because it's tough work being an ambassador, man. Everybody sees the glamour of it with representing whiskey and drinking whiskey for a living. That's an awesome job, obviously, but a lot of travel, a lot of late nights. Like, I hit you up for an 11 o'clock stream. I don't think most occupations can say that they have to worry about that. So
the important ones like emergency doctors and whiskey ambassadors.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you're in that company, then you're in good company. So not such a bad thing, I guess.
No, as you said, I have a very easy job, and I really do, and that's thanks to the liquid in the glasses in front of me. I get to work and be behind and support brands that I 100% believe in. There's nothing I wouldn't put my name and my credibility behind. If someone thinks, oh, you're saying it for a paycheck, honestly, I drank this whiskey for a long time. I thoroughly enjoy it, and I'm happy to debate anyone about it because, honestly, just good whiskey.
Yeah, no, it really is. If you're the right guy for the right company, in my opinion, because this is a great company to represent. I would be very proud to represent. So,
well, that's an honor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for coming on tonight. And I want to thank everybody that jumped in and stayed on for the full hour. You guys are awesome. Really appreciate the support. Really appreciate that you're not just supporting me, but supporting the entire evening. I've jumped into pretty much everybody's chat, although I don't know if I commented in everybody's chat, but I just wanted to see who was sticking around, and it's been almost the same people in every single chat. So that just means that you guys are so dedicated to listening to us entertain you, and I'm glad we have the opportunity, the privilege to do that. You guys are awesome. Really appreciate everybody jumping in tonight. Please jump into Malted Man Cave's chat following mine. I'm going to paste the link right here so you guys can go watch Keith at the Malted Man Cave. He's streaming right after me. It's going to be awesome. Again, thank you, Cam. If you want to stick on the line, I'm going to sign off here and then say goodnight to these guys, and then you can stay on the line for a couple more minutes. We'll just chat. Sure. I need to just wait one more thing, not any of our products, but I am going to finish my evening with a bit of a beer here. This is a beer made with Highland Park 12 called Harvestun. So if you're ever at a beer store nearby and you're a fan of Highland Park, feel free to give that a whirl. Is that available in Ontario? It is. I bought some at the LCBO. Oh, very cool. Okay, so my brother, and I just came from my brother's house tonight, and he's a huge beer guy. Him and my buddy Marco, they're huge beer guys, and they were letting me sample, and I was only doing like 1 ounce samples because otherwise I wouldn't have made it through this chat tonight. But I had a whole bunch of 1 ounce samples, and they'll definitely love to try something like that. So you'll have to forward me the information on it. I will. Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you very much. You guys can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and if you guys want, you guys can check me out on Patreon as well. Cheers, guys.